The editor and publisher in me feels obliged to talk a bit about the sordid act of publication. Emily Dickinson, who only published 7 of those 1,500 poems, as we know, started one poem. Publication is the auction of the mind, and it is a bit of an auction. But this is why we are here, and this is the aspiration of most poets. I always speak with groups of younger poets about the absolute importance of perseverance, particularly in the early years, and when you're trying to put together enough poems to publish a book of poems. Sending out. Always good at the outset to have, say, half a dozen bundles of poems out there with the journals. And one tip, not that it helped me very greatly in my first decade as a poet, but when the rejections were coming in steadily, was that every time I got a rejection note from a magazine or a newspaper, I promptly put together another bundle and went straight out to found a letterbox and got one more in circulation. This was my little puny protest here. I'm keeping at it. Because particularly I think when you're putting together that portfolio, it can be a demoralising business. And we know that until poets have, when poets have begun to appear here and there in newspapers, magazines, then it gets easier. There's recognition factor. Editors are human after all. I always counsel beginning poets to familiarise themselves with the publishing scene. For poets, to get to know the periodicals. There are a number of them. They're always springing up. As some die, more are created. There are new online possibilities now, not always paying ones, but sometimes offering a kind of circulation that the periodicals cannot possibly provide. We have writers' centres, we have festivals where you can get to know the individual players. I think it's very sensible for would-be writers, beginning writers, to get to know not just the periodicals, but get to know who the influential poetry editors and literary editors are. Really peruse the magazines. Support them too. Be good literary citizens. Subscribe to them. It does help. It shouldn't help, but it does help. I think we're all aware of the people who support the endeavours and help to keep it all going. It's an act of generosity. I think that can have many rewards. Obviously, every magazine has its own different tenor, style, direction. ABR is very different from Overland, very different from Meanjin, and very different from the Monthly, and so it should be. We'll all have our distinctive path. It's very sensible to get to know, to choose the magazine that you really, what's the magazine that really suits you? Think of it selfishly. Where would you like to, where do you belong? And then set about really cracking it. And that I think is the most heartening thing early on, when you appear in that magazine that you really admire. That's I think it is a lonely and unremunerative business being a poet in this country. We don't do it for remuneration or laurels, but it is an isolated business, and that act of publication in places that matter is a great incentive to keep going. My last bit of advice, particularly to younger poets, is to be realistic at the outset and not to be too impatient to publish. Not to be too impatient to publish, as I was, as I mentioned, that first book, that first manuscript when I was 20, ill-formed and unready. Bide your time. You will know when the work is ready, and it's much better when you look back on a first book that isn't a complete embarrassment to you. So there was a golden decade or so in recent years when a few major houses began to publish poetry. My first book, The House of Vitriol, in 1990, was part of a new series of Picador poets. That was a great opportunity for a first-timer. Picador, then Penguin, others withdrew from the game. But it seems to me to have been filled up, that void filled by ever more enterprising small houses, many in Sydney, some here, and I think there are probably the number of chapbooks and slim volumes has increased over the years. I think there are lots of ways of being published, and then there are all the online opportunities. I think it's something of a, certainly for me, in terms of the range of good Australian poets, good to extremely good now, is enviable and almost a wonderment for a country with our population. It seems to me that there are fantastic possibilities and voices in poetry. What is the problem is that there is no audience for the stuff. That's the real issue. And not even the poets themselves really support the poetry. We know that from the sales. If you publish a book of poetry now, you know from your royalty statement, the unit sales. It's just something has happened. And that's the real challenge, because I think there can be a voice in the back of your head when you do this stuff, commit a lifetime really to this stuff, and you think, why is there so little connection now? Why are people so timorous about poetry? How can you live without poetry in your life? That to me would be, and yet they do. And for contemporary poetry, I think the circulation is really small. I'm pleased that the newspapers have, after a period of reviewing very little of the stuff, have moved back a bit. I think there's a little more of it being reviewed. The Age now will publish 2 poems a week instead of 1. The Weekend Australian's pretty good. We're doing our bit. The magazines go on. But it's the matter of how you get the poetry out there, how you reach an audience. Not everyone wants to go along. Not everyone wants to do open readings. Not everyone wants to fill their bootload with books and sell up like a carpetbagger. But really, it's often left to the poet to be the salesman, the retailer. But there are lots of opportunities for this, but not all paying opportunities. And I'm enough of a publisher to worry about the speed with which Australian writers are almost giving away the expectation of payment by their willingness to publish for no payment. I think it's an act of great altruism and generosity, but it does have some risks. It does accustom the world to that idea that writing is a hobby, and that publication should suffice, and that the artist is not entitled to payment. This is a problem in all the art forms, and I do encourage people to if you see your writing as a professional extension of your life, then you're entitled to payment. So, thank you very much.